the central theme, the central point of all of this is, how did one of the most effective, well-trained, and technologically advanced armies and intelligence networks, which is what we have in Israel with the Israeli Defense Forces and Mossad, etc., Shin Bet, the domestic intelligence agency. How did they manage to allow these attacks, so widespread, so brutal, to happen? I mean, that should be right at the center of the media coverage. How did this happen? How could it happen given the defensive capability, surveillance capability of the Israeli state? Because that alone tells you this is not as it is being portrayed. And I've come across this this statement, which is said to come from an Israeli army commander, who is quoted as saying that the IDF inaction over this Hamas attack is inexplicable. Now, I'm going to go through this in full because it just focuses in on this big question from which everything else comes. How could it have been allowed? And it was allowed to happen. Now, I've seen this statement on the internet. I've not been able to verify it yet, but what it says is absolutely the questions that need to be asked. It's said to be a statement from Yoram Erez, commander of the Kerem-Shalom battalion, who knows the area in detail, this article says. He said, "Something here doesn't add up to me. This is a mystery that I can't find an answer to since yesterday. I happen to know," he said, "how things work in Gaza and on the border. I was the commander of the Kerem-Shalom sector. I was in charge of the Kisuf sector. I know the perimeter fence very well. I know how the army works there. I was in the Shati refugee camp in Gaza. I was in charge of the Jabalia refugee camp. I would make ambushes on the fence and deep in the area. I met Gazans, ate and breathed Gaza. The obstacle is so built that even a fox cannot pass it. They set alerts according to 3 levels of pressure," he said. "She must alert when she is cut," the fence he's talking about. "There are 24/7 forces that are responsible for arriving within a few minutes, if not seconds, to the point where there is an alert in the fence. Every day, they do at least 1 penetration practice," he said. "Each subdivision has a standby squad whose role is to increase the force in an emergency situation. Observations scattered along the border cover every inch of it. The female observers are champions in identification. They don't miss. They detect movement even before it even approaches the obstacle, day and night. At problematic points, dead areas, they place a tank with observation and detection capabilities. and a terrifyingly big firepower. In some cases, snipers are deployed in the field. Every day before dawn, there is a dawn alert procedure. At this hour, all the forces are awake. In this case, also the hour when hundreds of terrorists entered Israel. The night shift alternates with the day shift. The commander of each force inspects the axis to make sure there were no infiltrations during the night. Trackers that move on the axis know how to recognize traces. They know who crossed the fence, how much, and even when. Each scenario has a clear procedure. For example, a procedure for infiltrating terrorists, a procedure for taking hostages. Everything is written in blood and has been proving itself for years. There are several other layers of security that this is not the place to talk about. In short, we are talking about an obstacle that proves itself for years and years. Then he begins to ask the relevant questions, one after the other. So how the hell does a Palestinian tractor move towards the fence without anyone reacting to it? How did the tractor manage to sabotage the fence for a long hour and open access to Israel without anyone reacting to it? How did hundreds of terrorists and civilians cross the barrier without anyone on our side lifting a finger? How did terrorists arrive on foot and in vehicles armed from head to toe to dozens of Israeli settlements without any reaction from our side? How did hundreds of terrorists stay in Israeli territory for long hours, shoot hundreds of Israelis, loot property, without there being even a single reaction on our side? How did it happen that hundreds of terrorists kidnapped dozens of Israelis, woke women, children, babies, old people from their sleep, surprised soldiers, officers when they were not ready, and kidnapped them to Gaza without anyone stopping them? How is it that one bullet was not fired? How did all this happen under our noses? Where did an entire division go? Where did 3 brigades go? Who swallowed 9 battalions? What happened to 36 companies? Where did an entire regular infantry brigade go that usually outnumbers that elite group? Where were all the reserve battalions that augment the regular army? Where did thousands of soldiers go? Someone here needs to provide explanations. They are absolutely the questions that need to be asked, because everything else comes from that. If it was allowed to happen, why was it allowed to happen? Clearly, because there's an ulterior motive. Why would the Israeli government and military be held back to allow it to happen? Why would they want their own population slaughtered in the way that it happened? Why would they?